The question today is there hope for humanity, or are we on a downslide to destruction? So tuning in, we do have a lot of helpers stepping up here. And interestingly, the image is, I see the helpers stepping up and making themselves aware to me. And then they step back, and it's like, whoo, we're looking down through a long corridor. And there's a lot of smiles and happiness, actually, by the way, from these good guys who are going to help us here. So I'm asking, so what am I supposed to see down this corridor? Bright light. Okay, so the indication is we are on a path. We are currently, moving, moving forward. We're not stagnant, you might say. Things are moving forward down this very broad path. And this is on a worldwide level. And actually, the path has twists and turns. Occasionally, a smaller path will go off to the side. But generally, we're moving on this broad path that has some contours to it, I guess you'd say. And so the color, I don't know if it matters, is this beautiful red earth kind of color. I don't know how to describe it, but at any rate, it's a beautiful color. And feels solid. I think the indication is like ground. We're moving along the ground. This has to do with the earth and the projection into the future. And so I'm saying, well, what about right now? And the projection into the future is there is this light at the end. It's a beautiful radiant light that just kind of fills up all of that space as this path moves into it. The indication is that this is good news, that we are generally massively moving in the right direction, you might say, but that it's a process. It is a progression that, and they're having me turn around and look back, and apparently this is kind of like a normal progression. This is what people on the earth have been doing for a long time, and we're still there's no great change in that process from what has gone before. What has changed is that apparently people will try things, both to make things better and to make things worse. They're showing me that in the past, I'm seeing almost like knights, I guess you'd say. There have been different factions that have fought against each other. This is nothing new. We've still got factions going on today. And in those struggles, sometimes things have gotten much worse. They're showing the example of World War II and the Holocaust. That's where different factions led to a great deal of suffering and death. But that those things have happened in the past as well. Nothing new there. As we're moving forward, some of these things still happen. These are the things that we were, is this leading us into destruction? Those types of things would lead us to that question. And the answer is no, not really, because the past examples have also risen to a level, or, the subsequent after those happenings, people recover. Things get better. Lessons are learned. Improvements are made on the basis of those, they're saying, dreadful happenings that people, they're saying people inspire. I think there's more to it than just people, but people are the instruments through which some of these very terrible things have happened. But humans generally can learn from that and choose to not go that direction in the future. And that's kind of like where we are on this continuum. We have learned things. We are still learning things. But we're generally going toward the light. And even that, well, there are specific examples of where, even in the environment, things have gotten better, you might say. And we can look back on, oh, this was terrible. Fukushima is an example of what has come up where the nuclear disaster, well, actually Chernobyl before that, if anybody recalls, where there was a great release of radiation and everyone thought this was the end of the world as we knew it. We've recovered from that. We've learned from that. We've actually changed technology along those lines to help improve that. We have farther to go in terms of the health, safety, and well-being of the planet, they're saying, but that generally we're moving in the more positive direction. All of this being lessons learned. Another thing that happens around this is that individuals, they're bringing us back to the factions, that they're still factions, and that indicating that one faction is all for the highest and greatest good and let's fix things and move toward the light, and the other faction apparently is more ego-driven, ego in the negative sense of ego, more self-centered, more heavier is the way they feel to me. And these factions still push back and forth. Part of the push back and forth is for the individuals in those factions to have an opportunity to learn as well. So the individuals in the faction that is heavier have experiences as they're functioning in that faction from which they can rise to another level and learn about themselves. Oh, that's interesting, because the example is that there's somebody in this heavier faction who's being carried along by the group. There's like, okay, I belong to this group and I'm being carried along. Oh my goodness. And they don't really, that feels good to them at the time to be carried along, and it isn't until later when they may see some effects of how they're being carried along and what is happening that they don't approve of or don't like, that's when they start to think about who are they, who do they want to be, and do some self-inner work. Sometimes that self-inner work doesn't happen until after they die. That's interesting. But nevertheless, they've had the experience. They take the experience with them when they cross over the other side, and then they go, oh, maybe not next time. Maybe I need to look at that and progress a little further. So in one respect, we do hope that there is more of the faction that is for the highest and greatest good, just so people have a better experience on the earth plane. But apparently there is no one, so we can't totally turn against, I guess you'd say. We can't turn against the individuals in the other faction, because they're undergoing an experience that apparently is necessary for them to experience in order to give them the opportunity to progress in their own evolution. That being said, so here's the faction for the highest and greatest good. Those folks can look at the facts, you might say, as opposed to the individuals. It isn't a matter of take down the individual. The highest and greatest good guys are not going to do that. They're going to recognize that each individual has their own path, but they can address, how do we fix the nuclear explosion? They can assess situations on a more, they're saying universal, it feels like practical level, to raise the level of highest and greatest good higher, which generally seems to be happening. An example they're bringing up in terms of things are getting better over a long period of time actually has to do with physical health. That's the example they're bringing up, that people have learned things that were important to, like we can overcome the plague now much more easily than earlier, before we had certain medical information and so on. So people are moving toward electricity. There are just a lot of things that make our life better, is the term that's coming up here, that people work toward. Oh geez, it's always complicated, because even then There are some things, like apparently an example is nuclear energy. It can be a force for good or a force for evil. So we all, or evil, well, that's what they're saying, force for evil. So we always have that opportunity to choose which side we're on, you might say, in that regard, and which side to put our energy into. So it's more than just practical things, it's also an energy thing. The individual energy thing. The folks in the heavier faction have a heavier energy. At least that's the way it feels to me. It's like much more dense, I guess you'd say. The folks in the highest and greatest good faction are the ones that raise the energy level for everyone. Well, and these guys can lower the energy level for everyone. That would be an interesting video, actually, to see under what circumstances does which one prevail. I think we should do that sometime. Nevertheless, there is definitely hope for the future. And that hope is more an outlook. It's more an attitude. In order to make the most of that hope, we could adopt the attitude of hope in a very positive sense, as opposed to, oh, I worry that things are going to turn out all right. That's not as helpful as going, I know there's hope for the future. We're moving that direction. My energy is contributing to the high, bright, radiant energy that supports that moving toward the light. And so that's the take-home message for each of us as an individual. That's one thing that we can do toward moving everything toward the light, is to kind of manage our own energy and our own light and our own outlook. Look to what you want. Well, it doesn't have to be specific, actually, because we always know we can ask for guidance in what to do to help on a practical level, and we don't need to direct our prayers to something specific. We can direct our prayers to something specific, but always add or something better because who are we to know what the real possibilities are? They might be much greater, or there may be a different way to get there faster or better than we may be able to perceive. So we can ask for specific things, but always mean and add or something better, so that we leave the options open to our team up there to help us get there faster. The goal being for the highest and greatest good of all concerned.